Well, good evening and welcome to Season 2, Episode 3 of ACT TV. Tonight we're going to be talking to two of ACT's MPs who have for a long time been small business owners. In fact, while I've had to get some other people in to do the management, they continue to be involved in their businesses as they sit in Parliament. And the perspective that they've brought, I think, is just so valuable because there's not enough people in Parliament that have that perspective supporting small business. We're also going to talk a little bit about what's been going on today. But before that, I've just got to, first of all, thank Vodafone for couriering me Wi-Fi to the apartment that I've got here in Wellington. I would normally only come here if Parliament's sitting, didn't want to put any more costs on and have Wi-Fi here, but it's become essential over the last few weeks. So thanks Vodafone for sending that out. Although I noticed that it's actually a Huawei modem. So I wanted to give a big welcome to President Xi, who's no doubt now tuning into ACT TV as well. Ni hao and welcome. I hope you enjoy the show. Please let your people watch it. I also want to talk a little bit about what's happened here in our Parliament today, and particularly what it means for the mainland, where both of tonight's ACT MPs actually hail from. I asked the Prime Minister a very simple question. How many people are still needing to be tested in the South Island before we can say there is no COVID in the South Island and people can go back to normal? I think it's an important question because as goes the South Island, so goes the rest of New Zealand. If we want to be able to get back to our lives with no more lockdowns, we've got to be able to understand how long it takes, to trace to the end of an outbreak and actually confirm that it's all clear and we can go back to normal. Check out this clip and see what the Prime Minister's response was.
Does she stand by her statement regarding an alert level change in Auckland that, quote, "We need to be confident we don't have Delta circulating undetected in the community, and we need to be confident any cases we may have are contained and isolated," end quote. If so, is this the same for the South Island?
Mr Speaker, yes and yes. It is essential that we have confidence that there's no undetected transmission in our community. This is true for the South Island, as it is for Auckland, as it is for any other part of the country.
Does the Prime Minister have any idea how devastating that so-called watch and wait level is for businesses and people going about their personal lives, their education, and in some cases even seeking healthcare in the South Island?
Speaker, yes, but I also know that prolonged lockdowns and outbreaks that become uncontrolled are even more devastating.
How many contacts have been identified in the South Island, and are any of them still awaiting a test result?
Mr Speaker, 518 and yes.
How many are still awaiting a test result?
Mr Speaker, a small handful are not due their day 12 tests, but I would caution the member that those are the contacts we know about.
So there you have it. The whole reason that the South Island remains at level 3 with so many people unable to make their businesses operate, let alone be profitable, unable to send their kids to school and go about their work, is because there are, quote, a handful, shouldn't say how many, but a handful of people who are still waiting for their day 12 test. Here's an idea. Why don't we take those people, make sure that they're isolated, and let everyone else go about their business? When those people have their day 12 test, everybody can move on. That would be simple and sensible. But notice the other thing she said is those are the ones we know about. In other words, she doesn't really have confidence in the government's contact tracing, that they might have found all of the people who'd been in contact with the case, even though it would have had to have been in Auckland over 2 weeks ago. The result, the South Island is in lockdown for 15 days and counting, with another 4 days before they make the decision to perhaps release the South Island. I think that's simply not good enough, and it has implications for the whole country, because if we can't trace and test to the edge of an outbreak in 3 weeks, it means that a single case is going to lead to a lockdown of this length. I don't think that that's going to be sustainable, and the government's response has to be seriously sharpened up if we're going to get through this. So interesting what you can find out just by asking the Prime Minister a couple of simple questions. Now, I've got to say, we're going to try and get the show as quickly to time as possible tonight, because at 7:30 on TV1, there's Give Us a Clue, starring, or at least featuring, yours truly, and I really want to watch it to make sure I haven't screwed up the rest of my career by anything stupid I may have done playing charades on TV. But before we do that, we'd like to bring on those two ACT MPs I mentioned earlier. The first is Chris Baillie. Chris Baillie comes to Parliament with an extraordinary backstory. Chris has been for 14 years a cop, and particularly a police officer dealing with youth aid and troubled kids. He's been also a teacher dealing with kids with special learning needs, where he worked at Nayland College for cumulatively over 15 years. He brings those experiences, which you'd think would be enough for somebody to really add to Parliament. But he's also a small business owner, and to show he has a sense of humour, the small business he owns is called The Honest Lawyer in Nelson. And it's a great pub. I can highly recommend it. And if you're ever in Nelson and people are actually allowed to do things like this, then they should go on by. But Chris, right now, South Island's still on level 3. I'm guessing for The Honest Lawyer, it's been a little bit of a tough circumstance to operate under.
Yeah, it sure has, David. We can't do anything in level 3. It might as well be level 4. Even level 2 makes it, the regulations around level 2 are really difficult to operate. They actually end up costing you money. It's hard to make a living at level 2. We've got the wage subsidy, which is a nice gesture, but most businesses need to add to that. It costs them money still. The resurgence payment is a nice gesture, but again, it certainly doesn't cover costs.
Let's bring in one more person to talk about their business too. That's Toni Severin. She's based out of Christchurch. She's a List MP for ACT. Her and her husband have run an industrial cleaning company for quite some years now. She also brings the experience of what it's like to do provisional tax, GST, labour relations, health and safety, and every other aspect of running a business in New Zealand. Welcome, Toni. It's really great to have you on board.
Thank you for having me.
And just give us a quick update. What's happening from the point of view of your business under these conditions?
Level 3, we can operate. Of course, we have to make sure that our guys are keeping the distance and masking, and then also, making sure when we go to see our clients that, a lot of it is no contact, or if the client wants to be there, we keep within the 2-metre rules. Because especially with being a cleaning business, people want to make sure that we don't leave anything not cleaned. So it can be a little bit more time consuming for us, and a little bit difficult, to make sure that we're abiding by these rules.
Well, let's bring Chris back in. So like a lot of people, you guys are both navigating the restrictions on how you operate, but also the same constraints you always have of trying to make sure that cash in is more than cash out more often than not. It's interesting, Chris, you say that the resurgence payments and wage subsidy are a nice gesture, but I get the feeling that in the end of the day, it doesn't actually cover the full costs of continuing to keep your business under these conditions.
No, it certainly doesn't. And it gets frustrating because we still don't know, or businesses still don't know, whether the resurgence payment is going to carry on. It was good for the first 2 weeks. What about the next 2 weeks? We still don't know. We only just found out that the wage subsidy was going to roll on for another 2 weeks. It's the uncertainty. People feel like they're just left in limbo.
So let's just talk through, some of the environment that business was facing prior to this lockdown. I know there's been a lot of changes around employment, a lot of changes around regulation. Talk us through what sort of climate you've been trying to do business in recent months and years under the current government.
Oh, look, the last couple of years have been really, really tricky, really difficult, and hence the one reason that I'm here now, because it just got so frustrating. We've had a government that puts the minimum wage up 2 weeks into a lockdown. We've had an increase in holidays, sick leave, and there's more to come, and that's the frustrating part of it. There's so much uncertainty out there. I spent the day in Select Committee today talking about a bill that will force employers to pay for their staff to go to parent-teacher interviews. I've been to thousands of parent-teacher interviews over the years, and it is just it's another burden on employers that they just don't need.
So if we want economic and wage growth, fundamentally we need one Kiwi to offer another Kiwi a job thousands of times a day, ideally, and hopefully a better job than that person had before. But every time you put another cost, so it's not that going to parent-teacher interview is a bad thing, and as you say, you've done it many times. Well, you must have been on both sides of it many times. But nevertheless, if you decide to put that cost on the employment relationship, then you're going to get less of that thing that you want. And that's why I just see this government being so damaging. Toni, tell us a bit about, from your perspective, dealing with tax and some of the rules and restrictions that you've faced business-wise.
For us, a lot of it is health and safety, because we've been a water blasting business. We've got a lot of health and safety regulations that we fit. And even one of the bills that's going through with chemicals, hazardous chemicals, that can put a lot of burden on a lot of people as well. And especially storage and making sure that we've got chemicals. A lot of us are trying to move into environmentally chemicals, but there's always going to be chemicals, and even vinegar is considered a dangerous substance. So it makes it really hard.
Well, hang on a second, because we know that there is actually a role for government in regulation. We want governments to regulate against people basically harming each other. Sometimes it's easier to have a regulation than have people trying to sue each other for damages, and if one just follows the rules, it's easy. But those rules sometimes put more costs than benefits. So can you just rewind? So vinegar.
Yes, because it's considered as a acid. So vinegar,
wow.
Depending, So it's really crazy. Little things like this that's making it more difficult for safety conscious businesses to operate. When do you have any?
Wait a second, Toni. Do you have any vinegar in your house right now?
I do.
Are you okay?
I am. I need it to make my.
It's a hazardous world out there. I think maybe the government should come and protect you from your pantry. I mean, you never know what could go on. We don't want that thing to happen. So, I mean, I guess what you're saying overall is what I've heard from a lot of small business people, is that it's actually not easy. You don't have a money tree. And besides the cost that you pay to operate your business and try and provide your customers with a good or service they can afford that they actually want to buy, you then have additional costs put on increasingly by government, and that fundamentally makes it harder to expand and grow. Is that about the size of what you're experiencing too?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that the frustrating part, there's no expectation from this government that productivity needs to increase as well. It's just continually burdening putting the burden on the owner of the business, and with less or the same amount of money coming in, all of these other costs come on top.
Yeah, so this is something that's always puzzled me, because I hire quite a few people as acts now. We've got a team that support us in Parliament, and we're really grateful. I think if I've got anything right in my political career, I've been able to get really amazing people to come and work with me. And the thing is, when we get a good employee, we'll do anything to keep them. We really do. Now, I know a couple of them are actually backstage producing this show, so don't take this too literally. But if to listen to this government, it's almost as though workers are a dime a dozen and employers are all out to exploit them. I mean, can you talk a bit about how you view the employment relationship?
Me? Yep.
You jump in, yeah.
Well, look, it's hugely important, and you're quite right. You look after the staff that go above and beyond and actually create more income for you, and that's the way the system works. And conditions and wages can increase if productivity increases, but it seems that productivity is a dirty word, and everyone just should be paid the same, and that's more.
And the other thing, David, it's not always money either. Some of the guys, it's not money that they want. Sometimes it is a little bit of extra time. They want to change their time, or some of them they want to have time off to go to courses. And of course, they don't realize that a lot of employers already trying to do this because we want to make sure that our staff are growing. And, we also know that some of our staff will move on to bigger and better things.
Yeah. Hey, so just fast forwarding to COVID. So Chris, I mean, talk us through operating a hospo business over the last few weeks, and some of the things that maybe people who aren't in hospo might not appreciate, like, the stock that you've got to have on hand that you dump when you're locked down, and you've got to cycle back up or spin back up in order to keep going. Well, just talk us through what the journey's sort of been like for the last 2 weeks or so at a practical level, because I think a lot of people kind of just expect that you go into a pub and the orders come out. What's it like at the other end of the chain?
Yeah, look, it's my own situation, and a number of others who have been in touch with me. Last week was a classic. We didn't know what was happening. The announcement was going to be made on Friday night as to what was happening the next day. If the South Island happened to go down to level 2 on Saturday, then we wouldn't have had any stock, because we've had to throw it out. It really is the uncertainty, not knowing what the next move's going to be. It's very, very frustrating.
Yeah, doesn't that word just keep coming back, uncertainty? Hey, look, we should probably go to a couple of questions that have been sent in from our audience. Jeremy asked, what's the point of business opening in level 3 if a lot of our suppliers are based in Auckland and cannot dispatch products to us? My company is in the manufacturing game and cannot get our engineered plates and beams for frame and truss manufacturing. Does the wage subsidy cover us if the Auckland lockdown gets extended and we run out of material? Well, it's a really great question. I mean, first of all, you've got to think about it for a moment. If you're, say, a steel supplier in Auckland, and that's where you do your main distribution from, the last thing you want is to get shut down by a COVID case. So I can guarantee that supplier is going to be putting in more measures to make sure that they're not spreading it, that they're testing, that they're vaccinated, that they're socially distanced, that they're masked, and so on, than just about anyone else there is, because they can't afford to get shut down. Now, here's the problem. If they can't ship out of Auckland, then their whole hub and spoke model doesn't really work, and that is hugely problematic, not just for them, but for the whole economy. The question is, will the wage subsidy apply? Well, I don't imagine it would, unless you can demonstrate you've had a 40% decline since the lockdown. That's the real trigger. And I'm not sure that's going to apply because you're not getting supplies from another region. But Chris, you might be able to jump in with a bit more detail about that situation. If you're outside of Auckland, you're now at level 3. You took a 40% decline. You're eligible for wage subsidy at the beginning, but will that continue because your productivity or your activity is still suppressed by not being able to get stuff out of Auckland?
Oh, look, I would imagine so, but I couldn't confirm that. I know things are a little bit arbitrary, and they're very strict on that 40% rule.
Yeah, there's certainly a bunch of people who've been affected prior to the lockdown. For instance, some businesses who were affected by the stoppage of the Aussie bubble, people in travel and tourism, who, because their 40% decline happened actually longer before the wage subsidy scheme was brought back in for this lockdown, they're not eligible, which is completely crazy. And there's a lot of fishhooks in there that we try and help people with if they get in touch with us and try and help them navigate through the system. We'll just come back to another question. Yossarian, can you talk about how you will sort out the supermarket duopoly, which extorts the average Kiwi battler? Look, that's a really great question. And it certainly is the case that groceries in New Zealand are enormously more expensive than what we face. You just have to look at a supermarket catalogue from Europe. I know someone from Germany who can read them and got his family to send some through, and it's just extraordinary how much cheaper stuff is over there. So there's certainly a problem. I think if we were in government right now, we would be asking, what is it that another major competitor would need to come to New Zealand? Because to scale up a supermarket chain, it's not something that you just do overnight. So I'd get on the phone to some of the bigger players in Aussie and the UK and say, look, the New Zealand government would quite like a bit more competition. have you ever thought about coming here? And would you like to talk about what some of the barriers are? And I think if you look at the draft report from the Commerce Commission about it, well, there's already some of them. They're very hard for overseas investment to happen, very hard to develop property under the Resource Management Act. There's a lot of the labour law issues that we discussed. There's basically a whole lot of issues that make it really quite unattractive to come here. And when you do, it's difficult to expand rapidly and offer real competition. So it would be our starting point, is what are the barriers to more competition? And I think we'd actually go out as a government and be quite proactive and say, look, here's some people that actually could compete, bring new revolutions and innovations to supermarkets in New Zealand, but they haven't done it. Why does no one want to come to the New Zealand market? There's 5 million people here. Why don't you come? And I think if we actually had the initiative to go and ask a few of the bigger players, they might give us answers where we say, actually, we can do that. Suddenly we'd have a more competitive market. And in theory, although I bet they would protest, the incumbents would probably like to have some of those barriers reduced for themselves as well. So that's how we'd go about it. We've got Smoke Kit Barbecue New Zealand. I love it. I hope you're going well. My brother's all into that and always looking at his phone to see what his internal meat temperature is. He's got it set up on Wi-Fi, and it's a really great hobby. Would ACT support widespread deregulation of industries across New Zealand to get the economy moving? Example, the building industry suffocated with WorkSafe regulations. Well, Toni, I mean, you've talked a bit about that. I mean, you talked a bit about the vinegar. What are some of the other sort of more, and we know that health and safety is important, but some of the more absurd stuff that you guys are subject to?
Working at heights, 2 runs of the ladder, you're working at heights, so you have to have a hard hat.
Hang on, no, sorry. It's not that, Toni, I want to believe you. I want to believe you. But, hang on. Could we just say that again? 2 runs. Okay.
2 runs of a ladder is working at height, and you have to have a hard hat on.
What sort of ladders do you guys have?
A normal ladder. Okay, I'm short, but a normal ladder, 2 runs. This is some of the regulations that we have. Now, yes, we know that people can fall and hurt themselves, but how many people in a normal household or in a retail shop are standing on a ladder that's 2 runs or more to stock shelves? But they're not subject to working at heights like some of us within the building industry.
If anyone at home watching this, if you have a ladder more than 2 rungs, what we want you to do is put it away in a safe place, call the government, and they will come and take this danger away from you. That's incredible. You got any more examples? So vinegar, 2 rung ladders, any other grave dangers that the government's protecting your business from?
I can't think of any more, off the top of my head, but there's probably tons more that the work staff would probably point out to me. But this is part of it. We pay thousands of dollars to train our guys every year to make sure that they're safe, and we get them certified, this whole thing. But comes to a point is how crazy some of these regulations are. How far do they want to go really with it?
Yeah. I just wonder, Chris, if you had anything to say about a health and safety issue that the government's actually created for you. As of about now, if you were open, of course, let's not touch on that sore point, but you'd actually be responsible for enforcing people who don't want to scan the NZ COVID Tracer app. I mean, you already, got a bit of an issue sometimes. The Honest Lawyers are a very respectable establishment, but in the hospo industry, people have a bit of an issue with, patrons that aren't so friendly. How's that going to go down? How are you going to train up your staff to deal with that?
Yeah, I think that sort of just signifies how out of touch this lot are really. You look at staff at your average restaurant or pub, and look at the people they're dealing with, and whether are they going to have to show, if they don't believe they've scanned in, do they have to ask to see their phone? And it's going to create huge difficulty, and it's just not fair putting the onus back onto businesses, what mature grown-up adults not taking personal responsibility. It's just, I think it's madness.
Yeah, no, I really didn't understand that one. I mean, I think that digital contact tracing has a a really big role to play in avoiding lockdowns. It's a contact tracing failure that's got the South Island lockdown right now. And I know people have deep concerns about it. I'm an electrical engineer. I've looked at how these work, and I'm not concerned about the privacy. I'm much more worried about President Xi over there with my Huawei Wi-Fi router and what Apple and Google are doing following me on my phone. Those are the things that I think we should be worried about, not that app. Anyway, the way they've implemented it is something we just couldn't support, because you're basically requiring every publican to become a law enforcement officer for laws they didn't want to create, and I think that's really unfair. Look, we're going to run down time pretty soon, but we should at least ask a few more of these questions. Johnny says, why are there no South Island MPs standing up against these lockdowns? Well, I think it's very unfair. We got 2/3 of the MPs, South Islanders, standing up against the government's response and the mismanaged way that's kept them in lockdown. And the other one, I mean, I'd love to be a South Islander, but sadly, can't change where you're born. Very hard to control that. So I think that's a bit unfair. But Johnny goes on to say, we've not had a COVID case in close to a year, and we're treated the same as Auckland. But it's not strictly true now. My Auckland brethren are under level 4 still. But I take your point. We have the Cook Strait as a barrier, and it's not difficult to restrict ferry and aircraft. I think what he's really saying is succession. Do you guys have any plans to succeed from us in the near future? You have to fight over where the capital was.
Nelson. I would say Nelson's going to be the capital.
Nah, see, that's the wrong. I don't agree with that. The capital should not be in a desirable place. Nelson's far too nice. You don't want a place that's going to be desirable for a ballooning number of bureaucrats to live. So if you South Islanders do secede, then I would put your capital somewhere less attractive. Rachel asked, where?
Dunedin.
No. People vote for us there, Tony. Come on. So, it's a great place. Rachel says, what incentives does ACT propose to push consumers to buy from local businesses and replace more culture with small businesses back in the heart of towns and suburbs? Look, I think the main thing, I mean, I'm never in favour of messing with consumer choice. Ultimately, I think the choice is with the customer, and that's what anyone in business will tell you. If you don't understand that, you probably won't be in business for very long. What I would say is that every time the government makes a more complex rule or regulation, it's no problem to a big chain store. You make HR more complex, that's cool. If you're a big chain store, you've got a big HR department, they'll deal with it. If you're a small business, then that is a big cost that you have to do yourself. So our view is, look, if you really want to help small business, one of the most important things we need to do is what we talked about in response to that earlier question. We actually need to make it easier to do business, because every extra complication is just an advantage to businesses with economies of scale. Jeff has a question. How will business be impacted by continued lockdowns? Should we follow Australia and get rid of the elimination strategy? Look, Jeff, I think it's going to happen. It's a matter of time. It's really not going to be viable to carry on the way that we have forever. And we may lose the elimination strategy by getting out of control and not being our choice. What I do know is that we can't have a hard border and lockdowns as our only strategy forever. If we do that, then money and talent will drain out of New Zealand. We'll be all the poorer and, funnily enough, less able to fight COVID and every other challenge that we face. We've been told that we've got to wrap up by our producers backstage. And so that is another episode. Look, thanks a lot, Tony. Stay strong down there in Christchurch. And I hope that the Honest Lawyer is serving up pints and some of the delicious food that they have there very, very soon. Chris, thanks for coming on. Can't wait to see you guys back properly in Parliament as well. That's another night of ACT TV. Tomorrow night, we're going to be back with Cam Baggery, the former ANZ economist and now principal of Baggery Economics, to talk about some of the economic impact, the big picture of what this lockdown and this whole 18-month saga so far has done to the New Zealand economy and where it goes next. I really appreciate everyone tuning in to ACT TV, even you, President Xi, but I'm off to watch Give Us a Clue to make sure I haven't buggered up my whole career by making a dick of myself on TV again. Ka kite anō. Have a great night.